People do unbelievable things with money, but no one is really crazy. People from different generations, raised by different parents, who earned different incomes and held different values in different parts of the world, born into different economies, experiencing different job markets with different incentives and different degrees of luck, learn very different lessons. Everyone has their own unique experience with how the world works, and what you've experienced is more compelling than what you've learned secondhand. So everyone goes through life anchored to a set of views about how money works that vary widely from one person to the other. What seems crazy to you makes sense to me. One man's meat is another man's poison. The person who grew up in poverty thinks about risk and reward in ways the child of wealthy individuals cannot fathom, even if he or she tried. The person who grew up when inflation was high experienced something the person who grew up with stable prices never had to. The stockbroker who lost everything during the Great Depression experienced something the tech worker basking in the glory of the late 1990s can't imagine. The Australian who hasn't seen a recession in 30 years has experienced something no American has. You know stuff about money that I don't, and the reverse is also the case. You go through life with different beliefs, goals, and forecasts that are different from mine. That's not because either of us is smarter than the other or has better information. It is because we've had different lives shaped by different and equally persuasive experiences. Your personal experiences with money make up a very negligible part of what has happened in the world, but maybe it makes up 80% of how you think the world works. So equally, smart people or experts can disagree about how and why recessions happen, how you should invest your money, what you should prioritize, how much risk you should take on, and so on. In his book on 1930s America, Frederick Lewis Allen wrote that the Great Depression marked Americans, or millions of Americans, inwardly for the rest of their lives. But the experiences varied. 25 years after that book was published, as he was running for president, John F. Kennedy was asked by a reporter what he remembered from the Depression, and he remarked, "I have no first-hand knowledge of the Depression. My family had one of the great fortunes of the world, and it was worth more than ever then. We had bigger houses, more servants, we traveled more. About the only thing I saw directly was when my father hired some extra gardeners just to give them a job so they could eat. I really did not learn about the Depression until I read about it at Harvard. This was a major point in the 1960 election. How, people thought, could someone with no understanding of the biggest economic story of the last generation be put in charge of the US economy? It was, in many ways, overcome only by JFK's experience in World War II. That was the other most widespread emotional experience of the previous generation, and something his primary opponent, Hubert Humphrey, didn't have. The challenge for us is that no amount of studying or open-mindedness can genuinely recreate the power of fear and uncertainty. I can read about what it was like to lose everything during the Great Depression, but I don't have the emotional scars of those who actually experienced it. The person who lived through it cannot fathom why someone like you and I could come across as complacent about things like owning stocks and buying stocks and the way we are going about stocks today. Okay, we see the world through different lenses. Spreadsheets can model the historic frequency of big stock market declines, but they can't model the feeling of coming home and meeting your family, your wife and your children, or your husband or your children, or just the children, or even your friends. Okay, studying history makes you feel like you understand something, but until you lived through it and personally felt its consequences, you may not understand it enough to change your behavior. We all think we know how the world works, but we've all only experienced a tiny sliver of it. As investor Michael Batnick says, some lessons have to be experienced before they can be understood. We're all victims in different ways to that truth. This was adapted from the book The Psychology of Money, written by Morgan Housel.